Hello viewers, you're welcome to Economy Today on TVRC. I am your host for today. Olaniyan Kudus Oluwatobiloba is my name. And with me here on stage is Dr. Akintunde Somi Vincent. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you.
It's so good to have you on set here with us
Thank
today.
you.
Okay, so we're going to be talking about a very, very exciting topic, a topic which I'm very excited about. It's about climate change and flooding, these disasters and their impacts on the economy of Nigeria. We want to look into how these disasters affect inadvertently the economy of Nigeria as we see it today. Okay, so to get the session started, I would like to ask, Doctor, in your own personal opinion, do you think what do you think climate change and flooding are natural and man-made disasters?
Yeah, I think for climate change, it's man-made.
Okay.
Why flooding? Could be the combination of both man-made and natural.
Okay.
But many a times it's man-made.
Okay, so I would like to ask, what, in your own opinion, what is climate change then?
Well, climate change is, as the word implies, climate change is a variation in, the climatic condition of a given environment.
Okay.
That's just a variation. Like, for example, or for instance, in Nigeria at the moment, one should, presume that we should be in the dry season, but it's still raining.
Yes.
So that variation is what we called climate change.
Okay.
Why for flooding is more or less like a blockage a block in a particular channel, given channel, and when that happens, you see everywhere becomes waterlogged.
Okay.
And then it leads to so many anomalies, like displacement of people, and and what have you.
Okay. Thank you very much. We are going to come back to some of the effects you mentioned, especially with regards to climate change and flooding. But before we do that, I would like to talk about the drivers of these disasters. Okay, let's look at climate change first. What do you think? What are the drivers of climate change?
Well, among them is the emission of fossil fuel.
Okay.
Like when you see the environment, when you see the release of this carbon, this CFC, chlorofluorocarbon, into the atmosphere, and it leads to depletion of the ozone layers. And when that is done, don't forget the ozone layer is a blanket covering that covering the sun. And when there's a depletion, we witness an intense heat. And when that is done, you see there's what we call the iceberg. In part of the world, like Siberia, or some areas in the deep down Russia, or some other cold region like Iceland,
yes,
where we have a water body, iced water body,
ice caps, melting of ice caps,
and all this, when the ozone layer is depleted, you notice that all those icebergs, there's a kind of they are released due to the intensity of the sun, and they are released into the ocean. And when that happens, the ocean can no longer contain the water, and it pushes the water outside, and this what leads into what we call the flood, or this intense flooding that we are witnessing around the globe.
Yeah.
So I just talked about the emission of fossil fuel into the atmosphere, and again this issue of dropping, thinking that we have the monopoly, being insensitive, dropping everything into the gutter without looking at the ripple effect that in the long run is going to cause a blockage. It's going to block all those channels, and when that is done, not even the channel, and when that is done, then everywhere becomes waterlogged. And even when it becomes waterlogged, some plastic has subsumed into the sand, into the soil, and before you know it, they render the soil infertile.
Okay.
And even agricultural activities on that particular soil becomes so difficult, because you are not going to get the desired result.
Okay.
So these are some of the drivers of this flood, and sometimes even the climatic.
Thank you very much, Doctor. In fact, you've said a lot. I was going to ask you about some of the other impacts of climate change and flooding, apart from, of course, the obvious loss of lives and properties, some in most severe cases. So, but I would like to buttress, like make a point on what you said earlier on regarding the increase in the polar ice cap, because like of the effect of of these activities, and now they even inadvertently affect the environment and even the economy, because we are getting there. So because I was going to ask you earlier on some of the other effects and some of the other impacts of these disasters, apart from the obvious loss in lives and properties, especially in extreme cases. Now let's go back to the effect of climate change. As when we are looking at the release of the burning of fossil fuels into the atmosphere, which eventually releases some certain greenhouse gases. Okay, and these greenhouse gases causes the depletion of the ozone layer and a whole lot of other events that eventually causes extreme heat, which affects polar ice caps and melts polar ice cap, which increases the oceans. It causes a rise in the ocean level, and if inadvertently we'll get to see flooding along the line. So in a way, these disasters are interwoven. You agree with me that they are interwoven, but we want to look at how they affect the economy. Okay, so now let's look at this in the agricultural aspect. What do you think are some of the effects of this climate change and flooding in agriculture, and how they might affect the agricultural economy of Nigeria itself?
Well, I just talked about, we're looking at how the plastics could be a barrier to the fertility of the soil.
Okay.
That's one on the side. And when you look at the climate change, but you will agree with me that in Nigeria, that there's what we called, that most of our agricultural produce, they are time bound. That the period for corn harvest, to harvest corns, period to harvest cassava, period to harvest yam. But currently, due to the variation in climate condition, that all those things, they are becoming what we call an illusion, because some farmers, you agree that yam, for instance, cannot thrive in an atmosphere that is waterlogged.
Yes.
But currently, we are still our environment are still waterlogged. So, what about those who have put most of their yam, the yam seed into the soil at the moment?
Soil, yes.
So what do you think? What will become of those yams? So this another is a kind of it's one of the ripple effect of the excess waters that cause what we call flooding.
Okay.
For quite a while now. And again, when you look at back to flooding, and you agree with me that this leads into what we call to some modicum of epidemic diseases, outbreak of epidemic disease. For instance, when you see most of our northern part of the country, where we have shallow graves, where you see carcasses, being pushed into the water bodies, and again, apart from carcasses, most of all these vectors, pests, all of them due to waterlogged, waterlogged environment. All those things will definitely they are all harmful to human beings. And don't forget, it is when you have the strength, that's when you can dive in. That's when you can walk. You can walk with your full strength.
Yes.
But when the work is not there, all this work are not done by robots. Especially in this part of the world, they are done by human
beings.
But when they are not healthy, they are unable to do all this. They are unable to carry out agricultural activities.
Okay, that's very good.
So all these are factors that really, these are part of this that really affect our economy. And when that is not in place, then no food that will be pushed into the market, because the farmers are not in good shape because of epidemic diseases. Don't forget recently that of cholera and part of DRC, Congo DRC, and also part of I think in northern part of Nigeria, due to the epidemic outbreak in that particular region, due to due to flooding. Let's call it spade a spade.
Okay.
So when that is done, when the soil is rendered impotent, it's not fertile due to the influx of plastics that can spend over 200 years inside the soil.
They don't degrade.
Yeah, they are not. They are, and again, when that is done, crops we don't get the requisite nutrients. They don't have the requisite nutrients to thrive. And then crops refuse to grow properly.
Wow.
And when that is what they're starting to we only have little crops in the market, and even those little crops, it is those who have the resources that can always access those little crops.
Thank you so much, Doctor. I really appreciate that the comments you've made so far, and I would just like to permit me to comment on some of what you just said earlier on. So basically, we can, from what you've been able to say so far, we can infer that climate change causes seasonal variation. It affects planting seasons, and this consequently affects the growth of crops. And we also see in the case of flooding, where water bodies are clogged by plastics, especially when people, pollute the environment or pollute water bodies with excessive plastics, which eventually clogs water bodies and causes flooding. We get to see how that inadvertently affects the economy as well, because we get issues with septic tanks being flooded into water bodies, carcasses of human beings and carcasses of dead animals as well that might have died by some serious infection are washed into water bodies, and then we get to see the outbreak of different epidemics, just like some of the things we are experiencing right now in Borno. So now, and of course, because of that, we see in this internally displaced persons, people are displaced because of that, and there is the workforce is affected.
Even the emission of fossil fuel, like in the urban sector, where we have the emission of fossil fuel, leads to a lot of pollution. For example, in India, and some part of some urban areas, where you have high intense mechanized, industrial production in that particular part. Everyone's, you see the atmosphere polluted, and when that is done, living there becomes so harmful to human beings.
Exactly, air pollution and all of other environmental effects. Thank you so much, Doctor. That has been very, very amazing. So I would like for us to be able to finish up, because we've been able to establish the link between climate change and flood, and how it eventually affects persons, it affects the environment, and then affects the economy as well. So I would like to talk about the preventive measures, some measures that can be put in place to be able to prevent the adverse effects, the devastating impact of this.
We have to control the emission of fossil fuel. As regards climate change, we have to resort to what I call renewable energy.
Yes.
We have other renewable energy like solar, inverters, like even CNG gas that are very much that contains little of carbon.
Yeah, that green.
Yeah, green energy. Yeah, green energy. And again, as regards flooding, we have to make sure we make do with our channels. Our waterways must be cleared for water movement into the ocean.
Adequate drainage.
And again, if we are able to have renewable energy, the iceberg will remain where they are. There won't be any kind of depletion in the icebergs that pushes it into the ocean.
Yes.
And when that is done, they are unable to contain this, and they push into the environment. So, like I talked, renewable energy and making sure that our waterways are clean. They are not clogged for that. Eventually, when they are clogged, they lead into what we call excessive flooding.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Wow, this has been amazing. The aspect of renewable energy, green energy, we cannot overemphasize it, because it is very important, at least to ensure that we reduce the burning of fossil fuels and some of the some of the bad effects that these issues eventually cause to the environment. There you have it, viewers. We've said a lot about the current issues we are having currently, especially with regards to climate change and flooding, some of their devastating effects on the environment, which inadvertently affects persons and affects the economy as well as some of the preventive measures that can be put in place to ensure we reduce the impact of these disasters. Okay, so thank you very much for tuning in on Economy Today. I remain your humble host, Olani Okudusolu Atobiloba. I would like to say a very big thank you to you once again, Doctor, for honoring our invitation today to be here. And of course, till next time, take care.